Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Philosophy. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today's video is all about how to escape the 9 to 5, how to escape the rat race, what you need to do in order to set yourself up in a position where you can do whatever you want for work and you don't have to worry about money. If you enjoy financial content, travel content, lifestyle, consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video if you're excited. So let's go ahead and jump into my 7 tips on how to escape the 9 to 5. Tip number 1, this is one that I talk a lot about, and that is to budget. This is the very basic level of knowing what's coming in and what is going out in terms of your budget and what you make and what you are spending your money on. Budgeting is also a great way to figure out what it is that you can cut back on in order to increase your savings rate and to start setting aside a lot more money for retirement or for just doing something on your own terms. This is also the best way to figure out exactly how much money you can save every month and start to figure out what your goals are going to look like. And that brings me into tip number 2, which is to do the math. I'm gonna link a FIRE calculator down below. This will give you a rough idea on when you can expect to retire based on what you currently make and how much you spend, and also what you're saving. So once you do some preliminary calculations, you can get an idea of how long it's going to take you to get to a point where you don't have to work anymore. If you look at this date and you think, I don't really want to work for the next X number of years, I want to only work for like another 10 or 5 years, you're gonna have to play around with the numbers and see how you can either cut down on your expenses or increase your income in order to hit that FIRE date or in order to be able to retire earlier. There's also a few other options. When you're doing the math, you can figure out how much it costs you each year, and this ties into budgeting as well, to survive and cover your expenses. If you're just looking to get out of the job that you're currently in, maybe transition into something different, you can figure out exactly how much you need to save in order to take maybe a year or 2 off to pursue other avenues. Tip number 3 is to increase your income if you see that date and you see how long you have in order to retire and you don't like that. Basically, you can only cut your expenses down to a bare minimum. There's going to be a level where you're comfortable and you don't really want to cut down anymore, because then it's just going to feel like you're depriving yourself of enjoying the things in life. And I don't recommend doing that. So increasing your income will come into effect at some point. If you're looking at that calculator and you're looking at that date and thinking that's just way too long for you to stay in the job you're in. This is also tying into the other points that I mentioned, a really good place to decide whether or not increasing your income is really your end goal, or if it's to get into a different line of work. And this is when maybe decreasing your income comes into play. And you'll have to figure out the math in order to survive in between a transition in a career and be able to move into work that you might actually like. My 4th tip is to invest. Compound interest is everything. The sooner that you're able to invest, regardless of how much you're putting in, the better. If you have like 30 years, 40 years, whatever, to invest, compound interest is really going to help you out. The closer you are to retirement or the age that you want to be done working, the less your money is going to grow, just because you don't have the same amount of time for that money to compound and build you more wealth. I always recommend everyone invests in index funds. It's going to get you a really good, healthy return and protect the majority of your principal as long as you're in it for a long period of time. If you have a chunk of change that you want to access in the next few years, I don't recommend putting it into index funds. Those are more for very long-term investments. But GICs, which is a guaranteed income certificate, I believe, or bonds, is going to be a little bit safer. This is great for money that you might be using for something like a house down payment or going back to school, moving countries, or any kind of major expense that's coming up. I don't recommend you invest that money into index funds, but I still think that you should invest it in something that's a little bit safer. I also never recommend that you put your money into single stocks unless you're comfortable with losing all of that money. It is a gamble, and putting money into an individual stock or a few individual stocks is just never guaranteed, and you don't want to be gambling with the money that you're going to need later in life for something like a house down payment or anything that I mentioned before, like going back to school, or if you're really serious about getting out of the 9 to 5, pursuing a different lifestyle. Putting your money into individual stocks is just way too risky. I have a video that I will link in the IN down below about investing 101, how to get started if you're new to investing, and how to go about setting up a portfolio. This is one of the ways that you can protect your money and allow it to work for you, to grow in the market and give you some hedge against inflation. If you're just keeping your money in cash in a savings account that has 0.5% interest, or just keeping it in a regular checking account, you're actually losing money to interest every year because it's not growing with inflation. Basically, that money would be worth whatever inflation is that year, minus that percentage. Does that make sense? I don't know. Tip number 5 is to build your nest egg. So this would be the next step after you learn how to budget and invest and kind of pick out what your goals are financially. This is arguably one of the hardest parts to do, is to just commit and keep saving every month on a regular basis. Make sure that your expenses are staying within the budget that you have set for yourself and just socking away as much money as you can. This can take many years in order to actually build enough money that you feel comfortable either leaving a job that you really don't like, pursuing a different field, or going and just doing your own thing, maybe being an entrepreneur and starting your own business. Tip number 6 is to build your exit strategy. Once you've built a nice little nest egg, you have some money to fall back on. Maybe you have some fuck you money, which is when you can stop doing everything your boss asks you to because you got some money in the bank and you can fall back on that if anything were to happen. Once you have that set up and maybe you have a year's worth of savings in the bank, maybe more, this is when you can really start to plan your exit strategy. So if you find after you have gone through all of these steps that, hey, maybe you don't mind your job that much, maybe it's something you can stay in for the next 10 to 20 years or however long you want to stay in it, then maybe that is what your exit strategy is to just continue until you hit your fire number. If not, maybe it's to get out of the rat race as soon as possible, and then you just have to really commit to saving as much money as you possibly can. Maybe it's just saving enough so that you can take a couple years off and do your own thing. Maybe it's saving enough so you can start your own business. So this is when you really start to gauge how much wealth you need to build in order to pursue that exit strategy. Make sure you're clear on what your goals are and that they're measurable and actually realistic in terms of what your current salary is. And the last step, I guess this is more steps than tips, but the last step is to execute your plan. So once you hit that number, you can actually go through and do whatever it is that you've been planning to do instead of grinding away in the 9 to 5. Whether that's retiring early, going back to school, changing careers, doing your own thing in the business world, starting your own business. But don't expect it to fix all of your problems. Getting out of the 9 to 5 is not always a solution to everything that you think might be wrong in your life. This is something that I have definitely learned by going into a more coast-fire lifestyle, is that I do still have a lot of anxieties and issues in my own life that do not stem from work, that are stemming from other areas. So once you get this magical number and you're ready to shift, just be aware that it's probably not going to solve all of your problems, and you have to be really conscious of that and make sure that you're not putting all of the blame for everything onto your job, because it really might not be your job. It's also okay to change your mind. If you're halfway through saving for whatever amount you set in your original goals and you decide that, you know what, I don't really want to do that, I want to get out of this job now and do something different, it's totally fine to change your mind as long as you're saving money and putting yourself in a position where you can make those choices. Just make sure you do the math and ensure that you're going to be able to take on your expenses with whatever decision you decide to make. And the last part of that is that life happens. You're not going to be able to plan for every single thing. You're not going to be able to plan for every health crisis, every family crisis, every change in what you want to do, any kind of accident you might have. There's so many things that can happen in life. All you can do is really set goals and strive to achieve them, and make sure that you're making changes along the way depending on your circumstances. Life is going to happen and you're going to want to be prepared for those changes. If you're in a routine where you're saving money and you're not spending every single thing you make, you're going to be in a much better position than a lot of people to be able to take on those emergencies or anything like a recession or losing your job or something where you're just put in a position where you have to lean on your savings. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment down in the section below about why you want to escape the 9 to 5 and what your plans are if you get to a point where you're actually able to do that. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.